Sir, good evening to one and all. Wishing all a happy and prosperous New Year 2023 in advance. On behalf of API, ICP, MESAT and Whole Medical Academy, I heartily welcome one and all for the virtual program on COVID-19 update. I welcome all delegates who have joined virtually from whichever place to learn from the esteemed faculty. I welcome our guest of honor, Dr. P.S. Shankar, Professor Emeritus RGHS Bangalore and KBN Medical University Gulbarga. I welcome Dr. Maya, Patron, Dr. K. Govind Babu, Chairman, API, Dr. Vishwanath, Secretary, Dr. Ravi Kirti, Central API Member, Dr. Rajshekhar, Immediate Past Chairman, and Dr. Shivraj Al-Shetty, President, MESAT. I welcome our guest of honor, Dr. Muruganathan, Past President, API, and Past Governor, ACP India Chapter, and many other organizations. I welcome our today's chief guest, Dr. Shyam Sundar, National President, API, Distinguished Professor, Infectious Disease Research Laboratory, Department of Medicine, Institute of Medical Sciences, Banaras Hindu University, a great academician, researcher, scholar with many publications, both national and internationally. I welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Raman Gangakerdkar, Padma Shri Awardee, former Head Division of Epidemiology and Communicable Diseases, ICMR, New Delhi. I welcome our Chief Moderator, Dr. P.C. Manoria, Director, Manoria Heart Center, Bhopal, who was the past President of API, CSI, and so many other organizations, a great teacher for excellence in the field of cardiology in the country. I also welcome our today's panelist, Dr. Suresh Kumar, Infectious Disease Specialist from Apollo Hospital, Chennai, a great academician, received many awards and many publications to his credit. I also invite our other panelist, Dr. N.K. Singh, a senior physician and diabetologist from Jharkhand. He is the admin and founder of CME India, a well-known personality in the WhatsApp University, what we call. On this occasion, I salute the COVID-19 healthcare workers for rendering their untired service to COVID-19 patients, anticipating the fresh wave to come. Let us not waste the time by reading their CV profile, which runs in pages. Let us utilize time by hearing and exchange of knowledge with them in the respective specialty. As many delegates who have registered from many states, making a national event, the advantage of virtual meeting, which COVID-19 pandemic has taught a new normal life. Now we have formal virtual inauguration.
शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः दीपज्योतिर्परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपज्योतिर्परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपो हरतु मे पापं सन्ध्यादीपनमो.
We are virtually honoring all our guest faculty for their tremendous contribution to their work done in their respective field in the country, and as a mark of respect to all physicians on this Physician Day weekend, which we are celebrating. Now I request Dr. P.S. Shankar sir to address the gathering.
Dr. Professor Shyam Sundar, Dr. Gangakerdkar, Dr. Manoria, Dr. Suresh Kumar, Dr. Singh, Dr. Muruganathan, Dr. Maya, Dr. Govind Babu, Vishwanath, Sangram, Ravi Kirti, Dr. Al-Shetty and colleagues. We are meeting under the shadow of another COVID wave. Earlier, we had heard the exposition on the subject from Dr. Gangakerdkar, and he is with us again to update our knowledge. Professor Shyam Sundar and Professor Manoria are with us, and we have speakers from Chennai and Dhanbad. Dr. Muruganathan is with us to strengthen the academic activity. Our friends Maya and Dr. Govind Babu are here. I welcome the secretary and the governing body members of the APA and Dr. Al-Shetty. Since March 2020, India has witnessed the ravages caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The first death due to COVID happened at our place on March 10, 2020. We have passed through two waves. During the first wave, we were not prepared to tackle the menace of the disease. And the second wave was very severe and there were many deaths. By that time, the vaccine had come, both Covishield and Covaxin, and people took 2 doses of the vaccine and 20% also received the booster. Since a year, the cases are appearing here and there in the country, and the country is not totally free from the influence of the virus, its variants, Omicron and its subvariants. In the recent months, China is witnessing an unprecedented crisis due to BF7 variant. The infection is also rampant in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. US, Brazil, and parts of Western Europe are having infection from BQ1 and BQ1.2 subvariants. The original virus from Wuhan, SARS-CoV-2, is constantly changing, and the new variants of the virus are frequently appearing. During the RNA transcription, genetic changes occurring through mutations, altering the structure of the virus and has led to emergence of new variants. These variants have acquired specific mutations resulting in subvariants. Often a virus is compared to a tree which is growing and branching. Each branch is slightly different from the others. These variants, subvariants, and sublineages mimic the trees with main branches, sub-branches, and the leaves. And these vital mutations and the variants are monitored through the sequence-based surveillance. In our country, we have been attacked by Delta and Omicron virus. Delta virus created high oxygen demand, high rates of hospitalization, and higher mortality. Omicron variants are very highly transmissible, but less lethal and affects mainly the upper respiratory passages as opposed to Delta, which involved the lower respiratory tract. During the second wave, Omicron named BA2 was prevalent, and currently India has mainly the XBB variant. China has the infection from BF7, and it has the R346T mutation in spike protein of the virus and can escape the antibodies that have been derived from the vaccines. The symptoms of BF7 infection are not different from those infected with other subvariants of the Omicron. The rhinitis, sore throat, fever, cough, fatigue, body ache, headache are common. India has wide coverage of the vaccine with 2 doses and 25% have received the precautionary dose. Thus, the country has got hybrid immunity also, and it is prudent to take precautionary measures following the strategy of 4 T's and 1 G. That is test, treat, track, treat, Tika, and the genome sequencing. There is no need to become panicky. Vigil has to be kept on the passengers coming from BF7 affected countries, escalate COVID-19 booster dose, adhere to the COVID appropriate measures, and escalate whole genome sequencing. In this background, the current program on COVID-19 is relevant, and the topic is being discussed by the leading experts. We look forward to hear them. I'm happy to be associated with the inauguration program, and I wish the program all success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words of wisdom and sparing your valuable time. Now I request Dr. Muruganathan, sir, to say a few words.
Good evening, dear brothers and sisters. In fact, it is always nice to be in this platform where we meet a lot of stalwarts. This Physicians' Day all over the country being celebrated this last week of December. I had the fortunate opportunity to be with Shyam Sundar in Varanasi on 25th, and I was honored by him personally, physically. Like this, so many people in this week celebrating Physicians' Day in various forms. Some people are organizing health camps, some people are organizing CMEs, and then they do screening camps and then help people. This is only to show that we rededicate ourselves to the community. But my first message to all of you in the Physicians' Day, you love yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your family. Then you rededicate yourself for serving the others. In this new year, you should make some resolutions like that. I will learn a new language, a new art. I will learn new subject. I will start hypertension clinic. I will focus on wellness center or organize adult vaccination. So in the coming new year, you will have to do. One of the things now it is coming up is COVID. In fact, myself and Suresh have planned to have a COVID 2023 hope or hype. That's the topic which we are planning on 3rd January. So this is a very relevant topic because many of us, even the well-learned physicians and doctors, have their doubt in their mind whether to have 3rd dose or 4th dose, whether the COVID is going to come. Whatever said and done, we cannot change what we cannot change. So we'll have to be prepared. Preparedness is the key. Whether it is coming or not, the preparedness is the key. And whether the dose is necessary or not, the experts will periodically review and say. We don't have a solid statement from anyone that take 4th dose. Some people say every year, like annual flu, you'll have to start taking COVID vaccine. Whether this is relevant or good, useful for BF7, all those things, the experts will advise. But my message is preparedness. Be prepared to face anything. Good things also, bad things also. Where you have the COVID preventive behavior, you should encourage. And not only when there is COVID, always it is nice to have good habits. And we'll all strive together, make this world a healthy place to live. Thank you very much. And over to you, Sangram. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words of wisdom. I request Dr. Govind Babu, Chairman API, to say a few words.
Let me first start by thanking Dr. Sangram. I mean, his energy to conduct these meetings are commendable. Next, Dr. P.A. Shankar, he never ceases to amaze me with the updates he gives in such a short while. I think he summarized the whole thing of COVID today. I thank all the dignitaries who have come on to this program. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot because this is an emerging trend that is happening. And as Dr. Muruganathan said, nobody is sure about what is happening, what is the knowledge. It is very dynamic, so we need to learn as we go along. So with that, over to you, Dr. Sangram. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now I request our chief guest, Dr. Shyam Sundar sir, to address for inaugural address. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sangram brother. It is really a pleasure to be associated with this program. And I think it is a very appropriate moment to have this topic. Because, whatever you say that don't panic, don't fear, there is a lot of panic, lot of fear, both among medicos and general population, because it has been projected like that. And I think this is very important that we discuss, is it a real fear or what should we do to avoid things which happened in 1920 or 21. And I think there can be no better person than Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar to discuss this. He is the member of the National Task Force of COVID-19, and he is looking after also the management of COVID-19 throughout all over the country. He has spent all his life studying viruses. He was there in NARI, National AIDS Research Institute, for a long time, I think over 30 years. Then he was also for a while a director in charge of the NIV, National Institute of Virology, Pune. And then he came to headquarters in New Delhi, ICMR headquarters. And then he became the chief of the epidemiology and communicable diseases section of ICMR, which is very important. So I really welcome everybody. I congratulate the team of Dr. Sangram brother and his other colleagues to have organized this. And I wish this program a great success, and it will be very useful for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. Now we move on to the scientific session. I request Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar to deliver his talk on topic Will COVID-19 Make a Comeback in India? I request Dr. Manoria sir to take over for further proceedings as all the speakers and faculty have already been introduced. Over to you, Dr. Manoria sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sangram. I'll request Dr. Raman to deliver his lecture on Will COVID-19 Make a Comeback in India? Dr. Raman, please.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the kind words that have been used in the introduction. One disclaimer that I, as usual, would make that these are my personal views, and the battle is with the smart virus. Newer evidences that may come may change the inferences that are drawn. I hope I am audible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Now, if you look at where are we today in India, you find that all the spikes have gone. The number of new cases have dropped down. It runs into only 4 figures and even somewhere around 1,000 most often. And when it comes to deaths have also got reduced to a larger extent. We saw the dance of death sometime during Delta wave, which is very much evident in the slide that you are seeing. But at the same time, when this was happening, one of the things that was also happening is the mask use started dropping in India. You find that even from the peak, almost a third of the people, they're only using mask as of now compared to what it was before. And people started relaxing a lot at this juncture. And then suddenly what you find is the top 10 countries, which used to be traditionally India and European bloc and US, that suddenly changed. And you have now top 10 countries which are represented by Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan, and New Zealand. They had followed a zero COVID strategy. These are 5 countries out of 10 where the spike is suddenly seen at this point in time. You look at Japan, you suddenly find a small country. It has a population of close to about 12 crore, 12.5 crore population. You suddenly see the spikes. They are running into 200,000 to 250,000 a day. They have started declining only recently. But if you look at South Korea also had a similar kind of issue. It has only about 5 crore population. But the biggest spike that was seen was almost closer to what we had seen even during Omicron wave, which was 4 lakh people getting infected at one point in time. Now, why is the spike occurring in those places? They had zero COVID strategy. Japan, New Zealand, and China have now opened up. And when it comes to China, which everybody tends to worry, and the reasons which we will see subsequently, in China, they abruptly lifted the zero COVID strategy. So everybody in the surrounding, everybody on the street suddenly becomes vulnerable. They have used whole inactivated vaccine, and we know that we don't trust the data that tends to emerge from China as easily because of lack of transparency. But there were many countries to which China had actually donated their own vaccines, which they have used in their own country. And these countries reported lower efficacy, which ranged between 51 to 73% versus what was reported from China as about 95%. And these are the countries which drop use of these vaccines, which are whole inactivated vaccine. Now, 17% of the elderly population is there in China, and therefore deaths have to be more common compared to 6% in India. One must remember that the Omicron variant has a R0 value at present in China, which ranges between 10 to 18. But can this be a true estimate per se? You cannot say so, because at this point in time, home-based testing is also common, and this is a Omicron variant where you find people who are asymptomatic. They don't turn up to even do their own testing, and the result is this becomes an underestimate. Even if this is a milder variant, the large denominator and the large population size of elderly population, you will suddenly find that the numbers that are dying or getting hospitalized has to be very, very high. when it comes to new infections, we should not be surprised if we say that at any given point in time, that you might on a day you might find that the numbers having new infection could be anywhere between 40 to 60 lakh people, mainly because everybody is vulnerable and everybody is getting exposed because of the newly found freedom. Because of the protests that have been made, everybody is moving in that particular direction. And what is also important to remember is there is colder temperature, which makes people stay in the home, and therefore they get to get exposed because of lack of ventilation in those areas. And the black box with China, because of which we tend to get worried, is a huge population size of 1.41 billion population. And now they have officially stopped reporting cases itself. So nobody has any clue as to what is the number that is getting infected as of now, the number that have been hospitalized, and the number that is dying. And naturally, we also do not know which is the variant which is actually infecting predominantly the population in China. This outbreak in China evoked the fear of unknown, mainly because there is low transparency. Second fear that we have, will they ever report newer variants in timely manner? Will it lead to new wave akin to Delta that we have seen in India and rest of the world as well? And naturally, the government responded in a different manner to reduce the panic that may be existent. We do not know whether it is a cause or an effect. They strengthened the genomic surveillance, test all the passengers from China and certain other countries in the bloc, and 2% of international travelers, and anyone who comes out as positive, they have requested the samples to be sent for genomic sequencing to identify any newer variant that tends to come out of it. Mock drill for oxygen, the beds, the ventilators, and trained manpower have also been conducted. Use of masks has been promulgated in certain states. Some of us tend to feel that it is an overreaction. We'll try to understand whether this is an overreaction or this is something which we had to do in order to reduce the fear based on some scientific probability, which may be smaller, if some people may consider it as smaller. The more the infections, one of the principles is the higher is the likelihood that a new variant may emerge. And all of us know that you have close to about 1.4 billion population, which is likely to be vulnerable in China. So there is a fear that a new variant may emerge. If you look at the global genetic epidemiology of SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, you find that the Omicron variant was reported sometime in the month of November 23rd or 24th in 2021 in South Africa. Prior to that, we had Wuhan virus, we had Alpha, then we had Delta, we also had Beta in between. And now what you are seeing for last 13 months is Omicron variant in different forms, in different variations that tend to exist within, which we'll try and understand. If you actually try and look at what has happened in India, where we by and large tend to say that majority of the population has already been exposed to Omicron variant, you find that BF.7 has hardly been reported from INSACOG. If you look at that particular diagram, I can understand that it's very difficult to infer from the diagram, which becomes complex when it is being compared with rest of the world as such. Most of us think that we are moving towards endemicity, and Chinese outbreak is unlikely to affect us. The reasons that we quote are we have two dosages. We have a high coverage with a vaccine. Two dosages are being given to the adults, and these vaccines are of better quality. We have hybrid immunity because we got infected by Omicron or Delta or some other variant earlier. BF.7 and variants are from BA.5 lineage. So essentially, BA.5 was also present in India. So there is not much of a reason for us to worry whether BF.7 can spread rapidly or any other recombinant that is occurring can spread rapidly. Because one basic principle that we have to keep at the back of mind is recombination is an accidental event. it does not offer any survival advantage to the virus, and therefore these lineages are unlikely to survive longer and predominate. Say, the variants that are reported from China have not been reported to have a higher virulence per se, and we are better prepared due to our past experience. But now let us look at the science part of it. The rate of change or mutations or substitutions that tend to occur globally has been 26.5 per year across the world. So the rate is 26.5, but when you look at what is happening in Asia in last 6 months, it is 31.15 per year, which means there is perhaps an increase that is being observed here. We do not know whether it is a reflection of large population size and continuing pandemic in this part of the world. We still don't have sufficient idea about the same, but it is true that the mutation rates are higher in this part as of now. Now, if you try to compare the variants between the West and the East, what is it that we are seeing? We are seeing that BQ1 is more prevalent in the West, but when it comes to the eastern part of the world, you find BA 2.7.5 and XBB variant is more common in the eastern part of the world. Now, if you look at BQ1 has never been reported in India so far. BA.5 has actually was outgrown by BA 2.75 in the earlier part of the outbreak that occurred in Omicron. But do we understand the significance as to what does this signify when it comes to BQ1 or BA 0.2.75? The differences that we are seeing in East and West, we don't. Because there is one part which we have to understand. It also depends on the local transmission dynamics that tend to occur, the mobility that tends to exist within the population, and who is moving, who is getting exposed. They also decide the local dynamics. So it's very difficult to infer based on the differences that we are seeing. As of now, we treat everything as equal for all practical purposes, as even if there are differences. The dangerous sites for mutations that we have seen is in Omicron. You have close to about 21 such critical sites, and these sites are shared by all the sublineages of the Omicron per se. And what do these sites do? There would be mutations that will occur. They will impact the binding with the receptor and therefore affect the transmission efficiency. Now, if you look at 10 mutations that tend to occur, they are in the receptor binding domain, and therefore immune evasion is a common phenomena. Immune escape is a common phenomena among all these mutants that are coming. Now, if you try to look at the number of mutations that tend to occur of the 21 that we talked about, and try to look at the growth advantage that it provides to the virus, you realize that the more the number of mutations that tend to occur, you will find that the growth advantage tends to be higher as the number of mutations increase in that particular viral variant. What is a convergent evolution? This is a term which we have to try and understand. That convergent evolution is one wherein their distinct lineages independently evolve into similar traits phenotypically, which means they are evolving from different variants per se, but eventually all of them are trying to do the same thing, increase the transmission efficiency or virulence. And in this case, it is transmission efficiency. And if you actually look at a cross-sectional view, you will find that you would have multiple variants having similar kind of a transmission efficiency. They may have small genetic changes within, and this particular phenomena, which is also called as a soup, it's compared with the soup, is called as convergent evolution. If you look at current variants and try to look at them, you will start realizing, look at the number of variants that one can actually see. And these variants could be present in any country at a given point in time. None of them tends to predominate because they are almost having equal age in terms of transmission efficiency or whichever evolutionary feature that they have adopted. Now, does this viral evolution always lead to increase in transmission efficiency and reduction in virulence? Perhaps not. There are aberrations. By and large, this rule works well, but there are aberrations that tend to occur. If you were to even look at SARS-CoV-2, you find we had alpha and then suddenly delta, which also had a higher virulence than the Wuhan virus, the original Wuhan virus that was there. If you look at even influenza, the second wave of influenza had higher virulence than first. But one thing which we must remember, what we understand commonly is likely to occur as commonly as one can imagine, and therefore increasing transmission efficiency may be more common, and reduction in virulence is also something which is likely to persist over a period of time. Now, one consolation that all of us have, after its first report in November 2021, the the lineages of the reported variants continue to fall under Omicron for last 13 months. And why do I think it is important? Because if you look at the past, every wave there were different variants that were predominating, and these waves used to last between 4 to 5 months time. There would be a new variant that would emerge, and that variant would take over and a new wave would start. But here in Omicron, now we have spent close to 13 months and still we are yet to report anything beyond Omicron at this juncture. But there are certain features that we must keep at the back of mind and worry a little bit about from scientific angles. These viruses tend to mutate due to, first thing is error-prone enzymes which are used during replication, and therefore mutations tend to occur. You have immune pressure which may be induced by vaccine, or natural infection may also induce immune pressure, and the drug pressure that could come from the medicines that we tend to use. Now, these are going to challenge the virus to mutate in order to see that it survives, and the balance between in the battle is also maintained between human beings and the viruses per se. Now, we look at the vaccines. Do we think that the vaccines made a difference? Of course, they made a difference. If you were to look at the model data on no vaccination versus vaccination, you find there has been a drastic reduction in terms of not only mortality, but also in terms of number of infections that occurred, and even among the prevalence figures that were estimated at different time points per se. But there is something which we have to remember, that this virus continues to mutate, and when it mutates, the first thing that happens is these mutations tend to be commonly seen among spike proteins, and spike proteins are used for entering into the cells of the body, and therefore you will find that if there are escape mutants which will emerge, these escape mutants will ensure that the protective efficacy of vaccines against getting new infection will always be lower compared to that of hospitalization and severe disease, as we talk about. And the reason is very simple. If you want to protect yourself against this particular new infection that is likely to come, you must have higher titers of neutralizing antibodies which are present there, which is unlikely to happen because the immune system tends to see that the protective levels of these antibodies tend to wane off over a period of time. And naturally, the protection against infection is likely to be lower, and the virus is going to mutate only against it. Do we have some kind of evidence of the same? If you actually look at different mutants that are coming, different variants that are coming, you find that the decline in efficacy is more against infection compared to severe disease. But if you actually look at the vaccines that have been used in China, you find that the decline, whether it is Sinopharm, whether it is Sinovac or CanSino, you find that the decline is massive, mainly because they have used a traditional adjuvant as against the one L-hydroxyquine 2, which we have used against in the Covaxin, that we have developed internally as whole inactivated vaccine. When it comes to, but at the same time, there are certain disturbing papers that you will read. In certain papers, you will find that the proportion of deaths among vaccinated persons is increasing. If you look at overall increase, you will suddenly find that from December 21, where there were 5% people who were dying despite receiving vaccines, the proportion has gone right up to 38% as of now. If you compare that with those who are elderly, you find it becomes far more exaggerated. But why is this happening? This is happening mainly because of the waning immunity, and people, most of the people have received vaccines, and those who are vulnerable, those whose immunity has waned off, they tend to get infection and succumb to this particular infection per se. If you actually look at immunity that has been offered by Covishield, one of the reasons why we need to be worried about and we need to be vigilant is if you compare Covishield with mRNA vaccines and J&J vaccine, whether the waning immunity against infection after second dose or against severe disease, and try and see who is the one who's likely to have lower efficacy, you will suddenly find Covishield stands out pretty prominently as the time passes by compared to mRNA and J&J vaccine. So there is a reason for us to worry about to some extent at this juncture. We'll try and see what we can do subsequently. But what about natural immunity? Earlier we saw this was because of vaccine-induced immunity. But when it comes to natural immunity, you will find that the immunity against hospitalization and death tends to be retained for a longer period of time and in a better proportion compared to that against infection. And why is this happening? Mainly because this particular infection is going to stimulate T cells. And when it is stimulated, you will find that these T cells are trained to generate these antibodies against the infection, but it takes some time to generate the same, and therefore they are not able to protect against infection, but they are able to protect very well against hospitalization and death as a complication per se. The neutralizing antibody titers tend to be higher among those who had a prior infection. Now, if you look at this particular graph, you will realize that there are people whom no prior infection had occurred and we provided the vaccine. This is all mRNA data, unfortunately. And there are people who had prior infection, and that is being compared at this juncture. You will certainly find those who had prior infection at the background, you find that their responses for neutralizing antibody titers has been exceedingly good. Hybrid immunity, therefore, is better than all. Now, do we have real-time or real-life kind of data? This comes from Qatar, where vaccine effectiveness has been compared with those who had prior infection. These are people who had hybrid immunity, which is in red color per se. Even if they received 2 dosages, people who had hybrid immunity, they tended to show better effectiveness using these particular vaccines. If they had 3, this proportion suddenly increases of effectiveness at a higher level per se. So essentially, what does this tell? If you have hybrid immunity, if you had previous infection, you tend to perform better. Now, when you think in terms of effectiveness, data that has been generated by Pfizer, you will suddenly find that vaccines have been effective against severe Omicron illness, but they tend to wane off. This particular protection tends to wane off 9 months after second dose per se. And this duration of protection is close to about 6 months, post the boost that has occurred. And therefore, what does it tell us? That it tells us that we should not treat Omicron infection as a natural booster. We need to take a booster after infection, which will protect you better. And therefore, we must advocate for taking boosters to everybody who thinks that having got Omicron, I don't need a vaccine. This opportunity should never be lost because you are going to retrain your T cells more than twice. And therefore, it helps you in generating a stronger response whenever the T cells will encounter these viruses in our body and protect us against hospitalization and death. Now, most of these infections, Omicron-related infections, are going to be mild and manageable in outpatient departments. What is the good news in that? If you look at Paxlovid, it works against Omicron. Earlier, people were little worried that the efficacy may be of 89%. If you use Paxlovid, it may come down among those who are vaccinated or partially protected to about 50%. But this data is little difficult to understand, mainly because you are comparing clinical trial data with the observational studies data, which becomes little less reliable per se. But it is possible that there may be a drop in efficacy if you use Paxlovid among those who are vaccinated. There may be a rebound that can occur in 10 days after receiving the dosages of Paxlovid, and these could happen between 5 to 15% of the individuals. We may not require to treat them, but isolate them per se. Is Paxlovid going to be available for us? Yes, Paxlovid is being made available, and Hetero has also qualified for WHO pre-qualification. Therefore, perhaps Paxlovid's absence in our Indian scene may not be something which we will see continuously in future as well. You could use remdesivir, monoclonal antibodies, convalescent plasma, and molnupiravir. The question mark continues to be there because of reasons that we all know. A news item in China from China tended to say that Paxlovid is being made available in China. Now, this is little worrisome from theoretical angles. It can exert a drug pressure on the virus to mutate. Mutations have been reported on exposure to Paxlovid. These can cause mutations at 166 and 50 sites at the end of 5 days of treatment itself. Now, that's something which is worrisome. And there are certain cleavage sites where these mutations can also occur. So we still do not know the significance of these mutations. There is a reason that we should keep this at the back of mind, that mutations may occur and we do not know whether they confer drug resistance, and watch for what happens in China at this point in time. When you think in terms of monoclonal antibodies, so far, 5 monoclonal antibodies had been approved by US FDA. Unfortunately, these monoclonal antibodies have a shorter market life. The reason is very simple. The viruses tend to mutate, and they tend to overcome the responses that these monoclonal antibodies would like to have from these viruses, and they remain vulnerable all through. Even the last one, the Tixagevimab and Silgavimab, even it doesn't work against the viruses variants that are currently being reported, as shown in the cartoon that you see there. And that's something which is a worrisome feature. Now, what is also important is these were 5 which are approved, but when it comes to comparisons with those which are still in the developmental phase, you find that most of these new variants that have emerged tend to ensure that these monoclonal antibodies do not work. And therefore, the big question that is likely to come up is, will companies continue to invest in development of newer monoclonal antibodies? Perhaps not, because they may find that this is going to be a cost-intensive activity, and they are unlikely to make any kind of profits in the same. The reason why this I am quoting is presence of use of monoclonals could also have had impacted generation of newer variants and newer mutations, but fortunately this is unlikely to happen because this may not be used so commonly. Now, one of the things which we have to remember, which I had discussed earlier when we had a presentation in the last time, we know that Omicron has so much of variation from the Wuhan and Delta virus. And we also know that this particular virus, SARS-CoV-2, also is found among different animals which are susceptible to get this infection. So a newer concept came that Omicron actually originated from reverse zoonosis as a phenomena. Like we talk of human beings getting this particular infection from bats. Now from human beings, the infection goes to different animals, most often those which are domesticated animals or those who are in zoo. And from those, would we get it? We still have a question mark in our own mind because we don't have a direct evidence as of now. But it tends to provoke one for thinking that the next variant of concern may be far different than Omicron or its predecessors, because Omicron by itself was far different from the earlier viruses that had come. Now, what could be the immediate future of the pandemic? What we would like to see that we would benefit the most by perhaps elimination or eradication. But is that possible? It's not possible. Elimination and eradication is a very tough goal unless we have a powerful pan-corona vaccine that emerges on the research front per se. But what you are likely to see is a peaceful coexistence where perhaps focal outbreaks may occur and the disease tends to become endemic per se. But when we say endemic, there are multiple issues that tend to come to one's own mind. When an epidemiologist thinks of an endemic, you talk of, he suddenly starts thinking that it is a constant presence of this particular virus. It is in equilibrium and it is present in any geographic area that you tend to talk about. Now, if you look at the challenges that such a term like endemic can pose to you, is it easy to define diseases whether they have become endemic? No, you look at HIV. HIV, if you look at the incidence has gone down. But suddenly you find that there are certain subpopulations where the incidence continues to be high, whether they are sex workers, whether they are MSM, whatever we injecting drug users, whatever we talk about. So essentially, it's very difficult to classify. Overall, it may sound as endemic, but there are certain pockets where it doesn't remain endemic per se. When it comes to malaria, in fact, we had the worst to accept that malaria was thought to be eliminated at one given point in time. It can come back. No, it came back. So essentially, anything that is endemic, it is a dynamic state. Endemic diseases can always come back again is a thing which we must remember. Whether it is TB also has similar issues if you look at it from overall global perspective or a countrywide perspective also. How does one say that COVID has become endemic when the major challenges that you would have is the proportion of asymptomatic and symptomatic people? That tends to increase in viral evolution. So if they are asymptomatic, if they are subclinical, how do we say that the infection is endemic? Infection is occurring. Perhaps the severity of the disease is not as high as we had seen earlier. When it comes to testing, you suddenly have another challenge that tends to come. Testing has actually declined over a period of time that we have observed in the pandemic. If you actually look at infection and the detection, it tends to go down from 20 to 5 in Omicron because people were not coming forward to test. And what is also important is health-seeking behavior impacted the whole process in a strong way. To a policymaker, when you say it is endemic, they generally interpret it as not a major health problem. And that's also not a good issue because the focus perhaps tends to, in terms of interventions, tends to go down dramatically. To a clinician, endemic would mean something else. The number of patients with new infections are likely to be smaller and the infection may become seasonal. Then perhaps they start thinking, yes, I am able to predict when it is likely to occur. The number of cases are going to be small enough. And what is also important for the clinician, that it may also connote to him that there are very few cases that would be hospitalized and most may recover. And that is what a clinician would think in terms of endemic diseases. When you think in terms of communication expert, when they talk in terms of pandemic becoming endemic, what they would perhaps think that this means that you can perhaps change the risk communication related to acquisition and consequent severe outcomes for people to understand, for the awareness that you want to create about this disease. So endemic as a term is can be interpreted differently by different people. And the reason is very simple. If you actually look at factors that influence endemicity, there are factors which broadly fall under immunity. You might have immunity that may come from infection, and therefore proportion of people who may actually manifest with infection despite exposure will go down. The severity of infection may make it more undetectable. The waning of immunity also impacts endemicity. The immune escape as a phenomenon can impact the endemicity. There are different interventions, whether vaccine related or drug related or non-pharmacological interventions, and seasonality and interactions between different viruses can influence the endemicity per se. Do I need to worry as much? We need not worry until a new variant with higher virulence tends to develop in China. Looking at the current trend of evolution, one may reasonably be confident in believing that the world may be moving towards endemicity after this spike. If it goes down dramatically over next few months' time, you are perhaps moving closer towards endemicity, but still the infection is very much here. The outbreaks are occurring. Upsurge of infection is being seen in certain countries, and we cannot relax completely. Now, one of the good things which to my mind, which is important to remember, when you have very high R0, it works against any organism. The reason is the duration of the surge. If the exposure is going to be respiratory exposure and everybody is vulnerable, is likely to be exposed to it, then in those cases, the duration of surge is going to be smaller. If you recall, in Omicron, the wave lasted for a pretty short period of time compared to the other waves that we had seen earlier, because it had a very high transmission efficiency. The shorter the duration of infection, you will find that there will be reduced likelihood of emergence. If you recall that even the incubation period is shorter for Omicron, the duration for which we tend to isolate a patient who had Omicron infection is also shorter. And therefore, if you look at these three factors, you will suddenly find emergence of newer variants with major mutations is unlikely to occur to my mind. One of the things that tends to come to one's own mind, now that there is a confusion that you see among people who are taking boosters. If you compare this mRNA based data, what they did, now we know that they have a bivalent vaccine. There they are using variant from Omicron BA.5 and also Wuhan virus together to try and ensure that the protection levels tend to go up. If you look at one monovalent, which was Wuhan based, or two monovalent boosters, and look at the new FRNT response that you are actually seeing, and compare that with those who received bivalent booster, you suddenly find that even against those variants which are coming up, the response using bivalent booster tends to be little higher. Now, should we be then providing a bivalent vaccine in India? To my mind, as I say, this is one opinion where I cannot be very certain, but I would be the last person to say that bivalent vaccine should be provided in India. One of the things which we have to remember that we already had BA.5 infection in our own country, and I don't see any reason why bivalent mRNA vaccine should be given. And the reason I'll tell you why. If you look at the phylogenetic tree and look at all those variants which cause different waves, you will suddenly find not only from Wuhan virus, Omicron is far away. One of the ways in which I teach laypersons, I say these are real brothers, when it comes to alpha, gamma, delta, beta, to Wuhan virus. But when it comes to Omicron, it's like a cousin. And even in the Omicron virus, you find that the evolution is occurring at a rapid rate. And if you look at the branches that are being seen, you find XBB and BQ1. They are from different original lineage of BA.2 and BA.5, and they are far apart when it comes to phylogenetic tree, which means the entire evolution has gone rapidly in such a manner that there is every likelihood that a new kind of a virus which may emerge may not necessarily be closer to what we had seen in as Wuhan virus or SARS-CoV-2. Is that reflected very well in antigenic cartography? Even in antigenic cartography, you will find XBB and XBB1 and BQ1.1 are located far away compared to rest of it, and therefore perhaps a new kind of a variant may come. Then in those cases, what should we be doing? No, we could perhaps use nasal vaccine that has been developed by Bharat Biotech. Now, this nasal vaccine is based on an adenovirus. This is a similar kind of adenovirus that we have seen used in Covishield. This is also from chimpanzee. However, this is adenovirus 36 instead of the other two, even the Russian Sputnik 1 that was also used earlier. But this is CAD 36, the adenovirus 36 per se. And what they have done is a spike protein which they have not used in the Covaxin. Covaxin was BBV 152, but BBV 154 spike protein has been inserted there. And therefore, you find that if you take 2 dosages, they think that it would really be useful in providing you mucosal immunity. And what would this mucosal immunity do? It will protect your airways, it will protect your nostrils. And if you are getting exposed to it, your mucosal immunity will fight and ensure that the new infection finds it difficult to actually enter inside the body. But there is a catch. No, they have been only able to provide immunogenicity data. Though they are conducting phase 3 trials, it is still incomplete. They have about 3,160 persons who are likely to be enrolled in this particular study. But they have done some interim analysis where they show that if you compare BBV 154, which is the nasal vaccine, and BBV 152, which is Covaxin, you find that the immunogenicity at day 42 is high enough. Now, why this becomes an issue? We don't have efficacy data, like we didn't have the efficacy data that was there for any of the vaccines that we have used. They were approved based on immunogenicity data. But there is another thing that we have to remember, that the responses tend to be good in BBV 154. Though they may not be very significantly different, they are significant, statistically different. We still have to wait for the numbers to increase, actually understand what might happen. What are the important issues that may come? It is also important that the way people will administer this vaccine nasally, which we have hardly ever done as often in public health programming, you will find that it will decide the take of the vaccine. If somebody has colds, would I administer the vaccine? Do I postpone? How much of it should be postponed? These are critical issues which we will perhaps understand over a period of time. But this is the first approved nasal vaccine globally, and we look forward to it more closely and try and understand what impact would it have. We need to adopt a better lifestyle with masks. Using a mask in community setting, if I am infected, the risk of transmission can be reduced by 19%. So can we not teach all the people who come to us that if you are sick, if you are having any respiratory ailment, why can't you use mask for some time? And the risk of acquisition is reduced by close to about 30%. In conclusion, there is a small risk that a new variant may develop and lead to resurgence of COVID-19, and which is being covered by being more vigilant and being better prepared as of now in India. Please remember, this is a small risk. It's a theoretical risk. So infections will continue to occur. They may not challenge healthcare infrastructure. If nasal vaccine proves efficacious, we may be able to protect ourselves better than most. We may need to adopt a lifestyle where we use masks in risky circumstances, and especially by those who are more vulnerable. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. I think all of us enjoyed the flashes of expertise of Dr. Raman's lecture. Dr. Raman, the question always keeps on hitting our mind is why COVID pandemic is taking such a long time to wean off, because usually a viral endemic disappears within a year or two. So what are the various reasons why it is taking such a long time?
There's some of the reasons which become important is one, the viral factors. The virus tends to mutate very rapidly, being an RNA virus. The second factor is we developed vaccines very rapidly, and therefore the virus had another challenge for fighting against immune pressure, and we provided a fodder on it by ensuring that not everybody who was eligible to receive vaccine, they received the vaccines. Whether you talk at a different country level or whatever, in geographical areas also. And the third thing, now we have added an armamentarium related to medicines. To my mind, is all these together is going to put pressure on the virus to mutate. The virus is RNA virus, and therefore this pressure is actually leading to more mutations that are occurring. And the reason why we should be optimistic that it may not persist for a long period of time is the coverages are improving, and there is some kind of the variation that we had in management also has got reduced to a larger extent, and people have been exposed to natural infection all across. So to my mind, we are in a safer zone as of now, but the virus will continue to fight, and it has already, if I can put, now this is a pure speculation, it has saturated places where it can mutate. So now to think in terms of newer mutation occurring in spike protein is going to be a little difficult.
Dr. Suresh, will Omicron be the last variant of SARS-CoV-2? And are we heading for the beginning of the end of COVID-19 pandemic, or there's a danger of another bad global wave of pandemic in future? Dr. Suresh, please.
Yes, sir. Thanks for asking the question. It's a very difficult question to answer. But the problem is Omicron is not the last one, sir. The Omicron, the virus is going to mutate there. I agree with Dr. Speaker. Enough mutations happen on the surface proteins, enough mutations happen, but still, this is an RNA virus. And still a lot of people are not infected or not vaccinated. Both things is possible right now. So a lot of space is there for virus to still mutate. Only thing, the dangerous mutations or variant that is emerging, like a Delta variant, that's only our concern there. So definitely it's going to mutate. Omicron is not the last variant to me. It is going to mutate. Apart from COVID, all respiratory viruses, for example, the H1N1 influenza and avian flu, all our chances of coming back with a mutation is possible. So there is no end. One of the beautiful editorial written there, the pandemic is not going to over. Pandemic keep happening, and whether the same virus, what time it is going to happen, whether the same virus, that's a difficult thing to predict, but definitely pandemic is not going to over for me. Some other new variant or some other new RNA virus or some other viruses can come back to us. How, when, at what extent, we need to wait and watch.
Dr. Singh, what are peculiar features of Omicron BF7 variant? And does it have the potential to infect even those who are vaccinated in the past, as happened in our country? Dr. Singh, please.
Yeah, sir, this is a very relevant question you have asked, that if you see that this variant BF.7, that is the present, it is said that in China, this is creating the havoc. the RO of that virus, this BF7 is said to be vary between 10 to 12. This is a quite high reproduction number, as you are saying, but the Omicron variant, which I think the last January we suffered here in India, that was only the RO was only 5. So in that way, it is very difficult that whether whatever the news you are getting is science based or not, I don't know. But definitely it appears that the transmission rate of this new variant is quite high in China. But as Dr. Raman has already explained the reason for that, when this China has a zero COVID lockdown policy, that natural immunity was lacking in Chinese population, and even their vaccine efficacy was not good. In that way, somehow this has created more havoc and more transmission has occurred. And but still, what the internal news is coming, that even in China, the death rate is not so much as far as my information is there. It is definitely the virulence is there, but most of the people are getting, I think, by 4 or 5 days natural treatment they are taking, simple treatment and getting well. So in that way, this was the one reason. Suppose the same virus of this reproduction number of 10 or 12 comes to India, still I feel that our person, because this has been clearly shown that whether you have taken a Covishield or Covaxin, both has neutralizing capacity against the Omicron variants, whatever it may be. It may be B7 or XX, XBB, whatever it may be. It has been some studies have clearly shown a very good neutralizing capacity of our vaccines. So our only thing which Dr. Raman was also stressing is the boostering. Only 26% or 27% third boosters have been taken. The reasons are quite obvious. I think you know that when this COVID epidemic came, we had a fear. When this fear went away, we all became something, we were in the mind that this epidemic has now vanished from the India. But my prediction is that as the other experts in India are saying, that in that way, our immunity is quite high at present due to the hybrid immunity. We have got the natural immunity we have got from the vaccines, and our vaccination rate is quite high. You know, it is more than 220 crores. So more than 90% people are vaccinated. At least they have taken second dose. So in that way, our vaccine will neutralize the variants at present now, and that's why we will not see a peak at all. And this panic is quite useless. Rather, the media has fueled a very, very difficult panic. I don't see any rationality for that. My message is that, well, only in the crowded place you should use mask. Otherwise, in my opinion, there is no need of universal masking at present. There is no need of any lockdown. With the life should continue as it is going on. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Raman, the big nuance for COVID-19 in our country is, should India start nasal vaccine at least to the high-risk groups like the frontline workers, the immune deficient patients, and patients with comorbidities? What is your viewpoint on this? Or we should wait?
Government has already announced that it will be made available through private sector as the third dose, which would be entered into COVIN. It has also said that it will also be made available in certain government sites, but it's going to take about 3 weeks time, about sometime around third week of January, this vaccine would be made available. The bigger issue that is going to come, as you rightly say, that should this not be used to provide it to healthcare workers, those who are at higher risk. Most of them may have taken boosters. Now the fourth dose is not so far allowed as the discussions from NTAGI have gone. I think it is time that associations like IMA API, they should represent that at least healthcare workers should be allowed to take the vaccine. If this vaccine is not going to be made available in shops, to purchase and take the vial, that's likely to become difficult for healthcare workers. So I think we need to represent that at least for them, taking that vaccine would be useful. Because this is
Raman sir,
blocking.
can I ask one question here that lots of people are asking that if you take a fourth dose as a booster, what is the phenomenon of antibody sinking? So some study definitely has now shown that if you take more and more booster, it is not going to help at all. So do you don't think that the third booster was quite okay?
Third booster is fine, but this is mucosal immunity. What this vaccine is going to provide is mucosal immunity. If you provide fourth dose to an individual, which is an injection-based dose, whichever vaccine you take, it is very clearly shown that the protection against infection drops down by duration very quickly. It would perhaps protect an individual from new infections only for a period of up to 2 months. But the protection against the T cell responses has not been studied in any of these vaccines, vaccine trials per se, over a longer period of time. And naturally, you find that it's very difficult to answer that question. If as an individual I was to opine, I would say that if you have trained your T cells for 3 times is more than sufficient for it to keep in its memory as to how to fight with this particular infection. But this particular phenomena becomes different for mucosal immunity. For mucosal immunity, you need to provide the drops, nasal drops, so that local immunity is built in.
So Dr. Raman, does it mean that it will eliminate the development of carriers, the nasal vaccine, unlike the injectable vaccines?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Because
Dr. Yes,
this
please.
it has SIGA kind of a response. It's mucosal immunity that we are talking about. So it doesn't allow the virus, it neutralizes the virus before it enters into the body. Because this
Sir,
is
Dr. Raman sir, the data which we showed with this nasal vaccine, do you think it is sufficient to prescribe or to tell our public?
I cannot lie. It is still not sufficient. This is the reality of life. We should actually wait for efficacy related data. But the catch there is one simple, that if protection after, you have to give 2 dosages of nasal vaccine 28 days apart. Protection tends to come after 42 days. So which essentially means that if there is any outbreak that tends to come, we'll have lesser time to develop immune responses against it, especially nasal vaccine related immune response. And therefore, that worry tends to keep on coming, whether we should wait or do whatever. In any case, these vaccines are unlikely to cause any major problem because these are also based on adenovirus vector, which comes from chimpanzee. As it was Covishield, it was used in Covishield. It's just that the type is different. This is 36, adenovirus 36. Nothing beyond that. But still, there is no efficacy data. We are in the same situation as we were in 2020, when the vaccines were approved without phase 3 data. And first, they were to be provided to healthcare workers and frontline workers. So those question marks and questions would continue to remain there.
Sir, one question I am seeing the chat box by Dr. S.K. Gupta. Okay, how early will mucosal immunity wane off, or say how long will nasal vaccine protect?
We don't know that part, because this is first global vaccine for which we don't have even efficacy data. So duration of protection is still unknown. But there is something which happens if you get small protection also through sensitization. Every time when you will be exposed to this virus, it itself will ensure that the mucosal immunity will get a boost.
Dr. Suresh, if a new wave comes in India, do you have any anticipation, any particular part of India will be worst affected? Last time we had Maharashtra very badly affected, Delhi very badly affected. Any anticipation or any ideas regarding this?
Usually major metros will always face a heat of the any new variants. Any major metros, if you see either Chennai or whether it's Hyderabad or Delhi or Maharashtra, usually Delhi, Maharashtra is vulnerable, but most of the metros is vulnerable to any variant because of the overcrowdedness and migrant population. And but particularly migrant population, the vaccination is not great. So usually when overcrowded, migrant population is present, the chances of eating particular part is always present. And regarding the nasal mucosal immunity, what the people are asking about, this is not a live attenuated strain. For example, influenza, we are using live attenuated strain that produces better mucosal immunity. This is not a live attenuated one, since it's again equal to killed only there. We are not sure how much the mucosal immunity is going to last. But when the wave like what China is facing, it's going to hit India. That point of time, the 2 months immunity, people are looking at it. Most of the healthcare workers is calling me, can I take the 4th dose of it or not? That's the questions, $1 million questions. But if the wave comes and the wave intensity is much higher, we are going to see the patients in the wave. We need to have some immunity for next 2 months or 3 months. People are thinking only the short-term immunity to overcome the wave. That point of time, we need to take the vaccinations. Ideally, intranasal is better because it has got no contraindications. Ideally, compared to injectable, we need to change the route of entry and see whether the immunity is much better. Naturally, some mucosal immunity can prevent the entry of the viruses. But what we are looking at it, not the infections I'm looking at to prevent. I'm looking at the seriousness or severity. The patient should not hospitalize. The patient should not go to the ventilator. That immunity has got better. So you can take the 3rd dose or 4th dose, definitely that got boosted, particularly people elderly, comorbid conditions. If you take the vaccinations that prevent the death, that prevent the hospitalizations, particularly ICU stay and ventilator. So that's what we are looking at it. We don't look at the infections prevention there. That's not possible. Infection prevention has not happened. If you see the US data, people taken 4 doses of vaccinations, but still people are getting infected. So it won't prevent the infections, only prevent the seriousness and death.
Dr. Singh, how is the current Omicron variant infection different from the previous strain?
Sir, actually, this question we have not the current Omicron in India is we not experienced this, but I think the symptoms are the same in the China also, the same way the sore throat, the upper respiratory tract infections. Still, it is not penetrating through the lungs in most of the cases. So I think the symptoms are almost same. Only thing that the rate of transmission is quite high. Otherwise, the things are same. Or very aptly, the Dr. Raman has told about the management part also that only this some data which we at present find useful is with the Paxlovid. Otherwise, this other drugs and other monoclonal antibody that had already failed. So only thing that the symptomatic management is needed, nothing more than that. So I don't think it is very different from the Chinese symptoms which we are getting information or what was in the India. So it is almost same, sir.
Dr. Raman, other thing which keeps on bothering us that why Omicron is mutating so fast, and is it a remote possibility that the new variant may be more dangerous?
No, that possibility, as I said, is extremely remote when it comes to adding to virulence, to my mind, because if we have had almost 3 years with this virus, but you find that the changes are essentially occurring in spike protein or receptor binding domain per se, and therefore that may not remain as a stronger theoretical possibility to my mind. And as I said, the main reason why perhaps Omicron is changing is this virus is mutating faster is because it's a RNA virus, and on top of it, we have provided vaccines, and the vaccination could not be provided to 100% of the people. So you have people who are not vaccinated, partially vaccinated, and vaccinated. So you provide a fodder for this virus. Differing challenges bring out differing responses per se. There is one small thing which I would prefer to talk about. When you provide vaccine through nose, it doesn't only mean that there will be increase in mucosal immunity alone. No, when the virus is attacked, you will find there are certain antigen presenting cells which take those antigens inside the body and ensure that there are systemic responses that occur. Even T cell sensitization tends to occur through that. So it doesn't, taking nasal vaccine doesn't mean that it will only provide local immunity. It adds to the immunity that tends to exist even in T cells per se.
Sir, two questions in the chat box, 2 or 3, sir. Dr. Manoria, sir, with your permission.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
SK Puzai asking why this ChAdOx 1 failed. As one research work has shown that this ChAdOx 1 failed as a nasal vaccine, but BB4154 is working. Both are based on the same technology. So could be any reason, sir, for that? Or and second question is the under pressure of BF7 that government has approved BB4154 as booster while the trial is very limited. So I think you have already explained that. Yeah, and the third that I am Gopichand, can a person who has not taken third dose take nasal vaccine now? Please clarify. This is an important question, sir. Dr. Raman, sir.
This is,
Yeah, ideally, you want protection at both the ends, no? Whether the protection is in terms of protecting from hospitalization or severe disease and also from infection, because if you get infected only, then the issue related to hospitalization may come up. So as a third dose, if one was to think, if one was to prioritize, no, the first could be use of nasal vaccine, second could be any heterologous vaccine. No, especially, I still don't see Novavax. To my mind, Novavax was a better vaccine compared to the others that have been approved. We don't know enough about Corbevax. Though Corbevax has been approved, we still don't see the efficacy related data. You may just take a heterologous vaccine, and if nothing is available, perhaps homologous vaccine is also good enough for any vulnerable person. Because if the new virus is to come, if it is likely to emerge in China, it is likely to emerge in a very short period of time, because their wave is going to last for a short period. You have to imagine that the rise of new infections is going to be so sharp, and at the base, if you look, I would think that it will take maximally 6 to 8 weeks time to see that the Omicron wave which we are seeing in China will subside compared to 5 months that they had. And the longer the virus faces the challenge, the higher is the likelihood of development of variants. But if the variants develop within 4 to 6 weeks time, then one's worry would be, have I taken my protection of a vaccine, whatever is available? No? And that would perhaps will have to be answered by taking what is available at that point.
Dr. Manoria,
Okay.
I have a question with Dr. Gangakhetkar.
Yes, sir.
Is
yes,
it possible that, BF.7 will behave differently in China and differently in India? Or
No, sir. So far, what we have learned is more than 600 different variants have emerged out of these corona SARS-CoV-2, but they are not far different. No? So in different geographies, you will find in geographies, whatever feature it had, it continued to remain the same. So it is unlikely that
Mhm.
what would be seen in China would be different than what one would see in India.
so what is the report of BF.7 severity, or how it affects the mortality, etc. in China?
It's very low. No, in terms of virulence, it has not gained in virulence, but it has gained in transmission efficiency.
So why
No,
there is so much of hype?
That I don't know, sir.
The huge
Sir,
competition is.
BF.7, if you actually look at other countries, you look at USA, BF.7 survived for a short duration of time. No, it was already, the other variants took over in terms of percentages. And
Yeah.
this is a convergent evolution. So it will be like, if I was to give a simple example, you will see variant A to Z at any given point in time in different proportions in different countries. But BF.7 disappeared quickly all across the world, except China being reporting as of now. But if I were to answer very simply, China, if it is not submitting its own data, then how do I infer BF.7 is going to predominate in China? We have no idea.
But
Those were earlier reports.
but the lay press, if you see, and the is full of BF.7 as if it is an atom bomb and it will destroy the whole country.
Yeah.
Hey, sir, BF.7 is actually belonging to the sublineage of BA.5. We had BA.2 and BA.5 infections commonly occurring during Omicron wave. So there is a protection that tends to be there even at this point in time. I'll give a simpler reasoning. Now, if you actually see the entire COVID pandemic, currently you have the bivalent vaccine, but otherwise all the vaccines were based in Wuhan virus sequence or isolated Wuhan virus per se. And if you actually see over a period of time, though variants came up, these vaccines continued to be protective, or the variants did not have the ability to increase the virulence. There is no reason to believe that if I have received BA.5 infection as a natural infection, I may not be as well protected against what is being reported. But it becomes very difficult. I think part of the thing is it becomes difficult to explain in public. So people misinterpret, people draw their own conclusion. It becomes difficult.
Yeah, you cannot control that. I agree with you.
Sir,
Dr.
Dr.
Suresh,
Mahadev Desai has raised a very valid point that this BF.7 is already in India for over 2 months, but has not
2
caused
months.
large number of cases. Is it not a good sign? I think definitely this virus was present, and not only in India, in many parts of the world, but it had caused any havoc in other parts of the world. It is happening only with the China. And Dr. Gopi Chand again asked that my doubt has not been answered. He was clubbed with other questions. So he was asking that who has taken third dose, then take nasal vaccine now. I think that there is some news from this higher authority that you cannot take nasal vaccine as a fourth dose booster due to the antibody sync phenomena. Dr. Raman, can you please explain that again?
Sir, these are guidelines that have come from NTAGI, that Covin app will not allow you to take fourth dose.
Yeah.
If you have already taken 3, fourth dose. And therefore, I was saying it is a question that IMA, API, all of them together should try to resolve if the efficacy sounds as good. Now, with respect to BF.7, whether it was present in India, it was reported in September 2022.
Yeah.
The better part of it is the proportion did not increase. So what it essentially means is it did not have survival advantage compared to the other variants that were there. So we should not worry as much about BF.7. But as I say, in the lay press also, it becomes very difficult to explain. And today what has happened is all COVID publications, they are freely accessible to any person. Now they are open to interpretation by any person. Whoever is powerful in communication, perhaps those messages will go, whether they are right or wrong.
A couple of questions.
Dr. Suresh,
Dr. Raman, before I asked to answer your questions, I asked Raman, Dr. Raman, BF.7, we know it is not going to cause a big havoc in India, but our concern is XBB 1.5. Right now, the New York and New Jersey, that is facing a problem right now. The numbers is going up, hospitalization is going up with XBB. The problem, US is not like China. they got opened up previously itself, not like they're opening up now. And US population, most of the people are taken 4 doses of vaccinations. Despite 4 doses, despite mRNA, despite bivalent vaccinations, XBB numbers is slightly going up in people with elder age group. That is a concern. Now XBB is spreading from New York, New Jersey to the neighboring states also. If you follow closely the US data, that is a concern. Whether the XBB and BF7 meets, what's the new variant is going to come. That's a concern for us. Again, XBB also behaving like a Omicron only. It is not causing any serious disease for people in US. People who are above the age of 60 or people who got comorbid, again, the hospitalization is going up in that particular scenario only. So XBB is a real concern, particularly XBB 1.5 is a serious concern for us because XBB 1 and 1.1 seen in Singapore, not a major problem, but XBB 1.5 is a concern because right now New York and New Jersey is facing the problem spreading to the remaining districts. That's a concern for us. Whether XBB 1.5, is there any role in India?
No, as I said, no, I would perhaps differ a little bit. When it comes to elderly population in US, the booster dosages coverage is low, very low, no, compared to other places. No, as we assume, no, third and fourth dose being taken, it's taken by other population, but not elderly population. That's one. Second thing, would this come and challenge us? Yes, it could. There is no doubt on that. But the challenge is not likely to be higher in terms of the stress that it can put on healthcare infrastructure or individual outcomes, because it's not going to increase the risk of death, the risk of hospitalization. Risk of hospitalization in elderly population is mainly related to vaccine coverage with boosters. And therefore, as I say, people don't, so we should try to promote people to take the third dose, which is currently neglected by the population, at least among those who are vulnerable.
Dr. Suresh, the other issue is nasal vaccine is very easy to use. So what is your viewpoint? Should it be made available over the counter so that everybody can use easily, or should be mediated only through the government hospitals and the private hospitals?
This is not the usage pattern, sir. We need to know the records, whether we are vaccinated, how many times. That international agency should correlate whether we need 3 doses, whether we need 4 doses or something. That is why they're working on COVID portal. But number of cases goes up, government can modify the COVID portal and allow the 4th dose for definitely for healthcare workers. Number of cases goes up, that's not a big deal. But at this point of time, whether we can allow it to the private sector, for example, across the counter or over the counter, whether I can use it or not, that we need to decide whether the government wants that data. For example, somebody can't take the data without entry and without any proper certification. In future, people will ask, I have taken 4 doses, means there is no proof. That's only concern. That's only for logistic reasons and certification reasons. Otherwise, it's easy to administer. There is no contraindications, I told earlier. Only patient who's got anaphylaxis to these medications, they are contraindicated. Otherwise, for example, live attenuated vaccines of influenza, contraindicated in immunocompromised host. This vaccine is not contraindicated in immunocompromised also. Anybody can take, there is no absolute contraindications. So only thing, allergic reaction to the components is only contraindications for this vaccine. The certification issue is a problem. That's one thing. One question came up in the chat box asking about the PCR can pick up this variant. Definitely PCR can pick up. This is not like yes drop or something there. Our PCR can pick up this variant. There's no doubt about it.
Dr. Raman, is there any way we can stop the new variant from mutating?
Not at all. Not at this stage of the pandemic, because there are so many variations. No? Whether it is vaccine coverage, whether it is the medicines that they use, whether there is rational use of medicines, and individual variations in terms of following COVID appropriate behavior, protecting oneself with vaccines, no, to ensure that you don't get hospitalized. I think mutations will happen, but as long as these mutations don't increase the severity, I think we are in the safer zone, and there is no reason to believe that that probability that severity may increase is significantly high. So I would still assume that things should go as we would dream to, and we should be happy.
I think all of us have enjoyed the discussions. The audience has also very much enjoyed the discussion and we have learned a lot of things. So over to Dr. Sangram, brother.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful panel discussion. There are a few more questions, one or two. I think Dr. Suresh can quickly answer.
Saw the thing, they are asking about the doses or the vaccinations. Doses is 2 doses at 28 days gap. The speaker clearly alluded. Availability and challenges. Bharat Biotech has got good manufacturing capacity. It can increase its availability. If time allows that, they can produce a lot of doses. That's not a big challenge for the Bharat Biotech because they got good manufacturing capacity. Definitely the availability is not a challenge, but only one manufacturer compared to Covishield and Covaxin, but they got a manufacturing capacity is there. So if need arises, yes, they can definitely manufacture a lot, and we don't export the thing, we can have sufficient doses also. That's fine. That's not an issue. Most of the people already taken 2 doses, only booster shot. So only 1 shot is required. So the doses is not a concern. RT-PCR I already answered, and a couple of questions already answered by a speaker there. So any other questions, Dr. Singh? Yes. I have not seen anything unanswered in the chat box.
Yeah, there is one question from Dr. S.K. Gupta. Question of BPV 154 is availability of doses, not the indication.
That's what the doses I told. 2 doses
Yeah.
for a person who have not taken the vaccine, 2 doses at 28 days gap. People who have taken a dose, it's a booster dose, only 1 shot is fine.
And there was one more thing now, question of this oral remdesivir drug.
Just now, NEJM has got publications today only there.
Yeah.
It showed a sequel there. So people who want to read more, update the NEJM today's editions, you can go and read about it. It is good.
Yeah, Dr. Singh was discussing about it. Any comments about Dr. Oral remdesivir, Dr. Singh? Unmute. Kindly unmute.
Unmute and
Unmute.
please unmute.
Yeah, at present, we don't have enough evidence for that at present. So I think it is under trial. So let us hope if it becomes available, it will be a very good thing. But at present, there is neither is it available, not it is going if something new wave comes at that time, which is not going to come at all.
Yeah, before we conclude, we'll have one key takeaway from each. What is your key takeaway message, Dr. Raman Gangekar?
Don't panic. Believe in common things happening commonly. This infection should be moving towards endemicity pretty soon. Though endemicity would mean different things to different people. What we should take in our mind is we should not lower our guards completely.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Suresh?
Microbes are always intelligent than us, so don't underestimate your enemy always. Keep a watch on your enemy and wear the mask. Wear the mask because don't underestimate your enemy always. It's a fight between the microbe and us, so don't underestimate your enemy. Wear a mask. Like a mask, people keep on asking about it, particularly crowded places, closed spaces, hospital settings. I need masks there. People need to know whether I need to wear a mask or not. 10 days back is a big deal, but still we need to wear a mask in a closed encounter to prevent not only this Omicron, but even for TB and influenza and all other viruses, I need mask.
Thank you. Dr. Singh?
But one simple thing that it is heavily raining at China. Just keep the umbrella ready. There is no need to use this point of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Manoria, sir?
In looking at the current evidence, we are hopeful that the new variant will not produce a serious disease in our country.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So before we conclude, I request Dr. Vishwanath to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, sir. I immensely thank all the panelists, Manoria sir, for moderating this entire session. It was very good. And as usual, Dr. Raman sir and Dr. Suresh sir, Dr. N.K. Singh, we were fortunate to have your expertise and wisdom, And Dr. Raman sir, your disclaimer in the beginning was very nice because it's a smart virus. We know that. Probably suddenly I remembered Robin's textbook where he had mentioned that even though I explain a lot about malignant cells, they have not read this textbook and they are smart enough, they may follow a different course. Yes, I think the same thing applies here. And as Dr. Suresh said, we are dealing with a very smart virus. We should not underestimate. Thank you for giving us hope. And again, you should congratulate Dr. Sangram sir I think all of us should congratulate. This is the 10th CME he's doing this year. Virtual CME with all the expertise. Special thanks to him and all the panelists, all the people, delegates who have joined. Thank you. And even I thank my chairman of API, Dr. Govind Babu, for this. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you once again. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Stay safe. Thank you, sir.